My son was on a second tour. It was during the siege of Fallujah, and the first siege. And when he came back, he was torn apart. He had had many experiences that he didn't feel he could talk about. And often I would get a call in the middle of the night telling me that, Mom, I've got a gun in the mouth. I've got to pull the trigger. I can't live with killing all the innocent women and the memories of all the innocent women and children that I killed over in Iraq. And he took a lot of personal responsibility. He was artillery, and they would shell areas, and our shells have they're like cluster bombs, and they have these little bombettes that come out of the shell. When he went into a town, Nazariya, they had a girl there, and after seeing all the death and destruction, and he saw this girl playing with her brother and her sister, and when he got there and he got closer, he realized what she was playing with was one of the bombettes. And before he could warn her, it exploded and blew off half of her face, her arm, and killed her brother and sister. And I think at that moment he snapped, and he felt the only thing he could do was kill himself. It was the only right thing that he felt he could do to right what wrong he had done and to sacrifice himself. So he joined Iraq Veterans Against the War, and he started speaking out everywhere and anywhere. And he was involved in the protest with the uniforms and everything else. He was the March of the Pentagon. He wore his dress blues with his medals to defy his government and their policies. So the Marine Corps contacted him and said that if he attends, speaks out, or wears his uniform anymore in protest, that they were going to take away all of his medical benefits and all of his disability. Since then, I started wearing his hat at protests and at different things to show that even though they've silenced him, I've now got to speak up twice as loud. They've silenced his voice, but they can't silence mine.
It is the loss of our troops, and it's the destruction of our entire social agenda. We have people who are homeless here. We have schools that are falling apart. We have almost 100 million people out of 300 million people who either don't have health insurance or who are underinsured. We have people who are out of work, unemployed. We don't have. We're borrowing money from China to fight this war in Iraq.
The president's never cared about the Iraqis. The president's never cared about our troops. It's to him, everything's a game. And then when the Marines and the soldiers come back, their families, when they don't get their kids back, he doesn't think about them. He just moves on to his next little game. The Iraqi people, to him, 1.2 million Iraqi peoples, this is nothing to him. He has no concept, I think, of death.
One of the things you might be very anxious about if you were president in a war would be anxious about killing innocent people and having our own troops killed. If you were a normal person as president, you would be anxious about those things. But if you're like him, he says he has no anxiety about it. He sometimes feels bad about it, but basically he sleeps well, he's fine. There's no look of upset on his face. Johnson in Vietnam was like he had his head in his hands a lot. He was very upset about it. Bush is not, and he's not because he banishes anxiety from his mind. He can use religion, he can use exercise, he used to use alcohol. Anxiety is gone, so he does not worry about things that way. Most people see him as a puppet of Cheney's, or people see him as weak, and I think he's very strong. He's actually gotten everything he wants as president. He's been the most successful president probably in history of this country, and yet from his point of view and from getting what he wants. But from the rest of our point of view, or the protesters, he's been the most disastrous president in history.
The President of the United States.
States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil, arming to threaten the peace of the world by seeking weapons of mass destruction.
I am less interested in the judgment on this president, this one man, than I am in the outcome of this conflict. And I think there are a lot of people who will sometimes say they dislike President Bush so much that they don't care if the building falls down on their own heads if they can just prove that he was wrong. And I would say that better not to have the building fall down on your head, even if that means accepting that maybe he wasn't wrong.
The President of the United States is a war criminal. And the President of the United States has, in many ways, continued the same programs and policies of the U.S., the same policies of aggression and imperialist conquest, but he's done so in a very extreme, very dangerous, very arrogant way. The crimes are unfortunately very numerous. Since this president has taken office, we know the most astounding crime is he waged an illegal war of aggression against a sovereign country, against Iraq. He launched that war based on lies and falsehoods. He lied to the people of the United States to invade Iraq. He lied to the people of the world to invade Iraq. He lied to the United Nations.
This administration has taken the United States in a direction that is not democratic. It is anti-democratic. Torture, extraordinary rendition, wiretapping, eavesdropping. So much of this has been done in secret.
You have a right to freedom of speech.
Our rights don't come from your government.
Is anyone stopping you from speaking right now?
No, but they stopped other people. We had a negotiator come up and you arrested him.
These
No,
officers,
that's not how life works. That's how democracy works.
it's supposed to work, so let's practice democracy here, because
Yeah.
that's a good thing, right?
I think so.
So these officers now are here to protect the area that's called
President Bush and a handful of his advisors have really seized the power of the federal government, corrupted it and abused it and violated the laws in doing so. And they've made the country far less free, and simultaneously far less safe.
What's happened in this country under this administration couldn't happen if it was just one man or just two men. It can only happen with all those in high office who agree to go along with really what is a criminal endeavor.
If he is a puppet, he's the puppet who chose his puppeteers. In other words, he's the person who said, I want Cheney, I want Condi, I want these people because I don't care if they tell me what to do, I know what I want. So in that sense, if he's a puppet, he's only a puppet who chose the people that he wants to run it.
When you have a lot of people who do not support President Bush, that doesn't mean that they therefore support the people who are carrying placards in the streets, of which there are very few. That President Bush was popular when people thought the Iraq War was succeeding.
Bush is the biggest terrorist. I love you. You are his followers. This guy deserves a fair trial, just like Saddam. Yes. What God do you believe in?
Soon as the job is done. Nobody likes war.
According to the Lancet Medical Journal, perhaps 600,000 to 1 million Iraqis have been killed as a consequence of the U.S. invasion. There are thousands of U.S. service people who are dead. There are tens of thousands of U.S. service people who are permanently and terribly wounded with brain injuries and missing limbs. All of this because the President of the United States and the officials around him wanted to gain control over sovereign land and over its resources.
Now, many of us believe that the war all along was about oil. I said that early on, and I do believe that. Since Iraq had no weapons of mass destruction, it wasn't involved in 9/11, then what was it? It was about oil.
The United States went to war for fear that Iraq was developing, WMD, and those WMD were not as advanced. The program was advanced, but the weapons themselves seem not to have been there, probably. I think there remains some element of mystery about exactly the outcome of all of that story. So the United States reacted maybe prematurely, but to a real danger.
Sherwood was only in Iraq 6 weeks. It was on April 26, 2004. He was guarding the perimeter of a warehouse where the inspectors, where the Iraqi survey team went into the warehouse. And there was this explosion, and he was killed with the debris from the warehouse. He was hit in, it was a head injury that killed him.